let's just hang around this segment for a second about iron. I mean, why is it important? Not just for basic health purposes, but for people who do want to optimize their health, their performance, get the most out of their adaptations to training, and ultimately on competition day or game day or whatever, be at their very best. What's iron got to do with all of that?
Yeah, I think there's probably 4 key parts or 4 key roles that iron can play. The first one is it forms the key part of our red blood cell, which is called hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is responsible for carrying oxygen around the body. And that's directly related to our VO2 max, or our aerobic capacity. So when we're low on iron, we become low on hemoglobin, and that affects our VO2 max and our aerobic capacity. Another function of low iron is that iron's required in the muscle. It's required at the electron transport chain to make ATP, or to make energy. And if you're low on iron and there's not enough iron within that electron transport chain, you may become more mechanically inefficient. You may not be producing energy as well, and that's going to affect your performance directly. We also know, though, that iron's really important for the immune system. So if you have iron that's too low as well as iron that's too high, you may be at risk of illness more frequently, because iron's sort of been sequestering in the cell. And there's a whole evolutionary chain to why we do that. But essentially, it may affect your training availability, which isn't good for optimal performance. And then finally, we also know that iron has important roles in the brain and for cognitive function. To be honest, in terms of athlete performance, this is really hard to measure, and we haven't got a lot of athlete information on this. But based on what we do know about the biology, it could be inferred that iron deficiency may impact cognitive functioning during sports, and this may be applicable for team sports where decision making is really important. Iron deficiency may be impairing your decisions on game day.
So, of course, we're focusing also here not just on iron in this particular segment, but also on females and issues they have with iron. And there are various reasons that spring to mind beyond there being an athlete that you've discussed, and that potentially increasing their iron requirements. But being a female alone also has an interesting relationship with iron needs. What's going on there?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, when we're menstruating, we are losing a significant amount of iron, and that in itself is meaning the body is sort of lowering its hepcidin levels to try and absorb more iron. It's trying to encourage more iron absorption to occur to replace those losses. So we see an inherent loss and requirement for more iron just from biologically being a female. As I also said, that there's changes in estrogen and progesterone, which may influence the amount of iron we're absorbing across that menstrual cycle. So there's that influence as well. We also think that females, and this is really difficult to quantify because I think low energy availability has been a female issue in terms of its origins in the female athlete triad. But typically we associate low energy availability or a higher prevalence of low energy availability with female athletes. Whether this is true or not is probably because we don't have the best tools as of yet to get some good data on whether low energy availability actually differs between sexes. But typically there's been a lot of research around low energy availability in females, potentially under-eating in females, and therefore if you are not eating enough calories to meet your daily requirements and the overall pool of energy is shrinking, then the overall amount of micronutrients is shrinking as well. And so that's not just applicable to iron, but applicable to all sorts of other micronutrients. But essentially that means that your diet is smaller, yet you're requiring, in the case of iron, more iron than a male. So your diet has to be so nutrient rich if you're either an athlete that's needing to limit your food intake for weight sensitive purposes in terms of being in an aesthetic sport or a weight controlled sport. But if you're also just maybe not aware that you're under-eating, you're also not only just under-eating in terms of calories, you're probably under-eating in terms of micronutrients, which is almost a doubly compounded problem when we think of things like iron.